Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast for our guide on effective mentoring in higher ed. Actually, our book is called Making Connections, a handbook for effective formal mentoring programs in academia. And I am honored to be here today with two of the three authors for our case study. Number one in chapter 20, networked mentoring programs, targeted developmental relationships, and building a broader community. That was written by Valerie Paquette, Wendy Murphy, and Susan Duffy. I'm here today with both Valerie and Wendy. Valerie Paquette is was the director for the Center for Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership at Babson College. She has over 18 years experience delivering engaging experiences and building communities that empower individuals and organizations to maximize their potential. Wendy Murphy is the Associate Dean of the Undergraduate School and Professor of Management at Babson College. She earned her PhD from Boston College and teaches organizational behavior, leadership, and negotiation across undergraduate, MBA, MSM, and executive education programs. And her research has intersected with careers, mentoring, and diversity issues. And their third contributor, Susan Duffy, who is not with us today, is an associate provost for transformational learning and partnerships at the Wentworth Institute of Technology and former executive director of CWEL at Babson College. And so welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So we're really excited for folks to read your case study because it walks us through some really impactful programs for students in higher ed at different levels and at different stages in their academic career. So Wendy, can you tell us what inspired your research and ultimately the implementation of this mentoring program?
Oh, so of course, the research was inspired. I studied mentoring as part of my doctoral program work, and I studied under Kathy Cram, who, many people consider the mother of mentoring in modern organizations. She wrote the book Mentoring at Work in 1985. And so my work built off of, stood on the shoulder of giants and examined developmental networks, and in particular, comparing and contrasting men versus women and how they built those networks. And so what we know is that a developmental relationship is really essential for long-term career success, and particularly in early career. And so from a student perspective, it became really important for us to consider how to enable students to learn the skills they need to be successful in mentoring relationships. So that means learning how to be a good mentee. And how much better to learn those skills when you're still a student than to wait till you get in the workplace. And so the center has had a mentoring program for women since its inception, and did a very intentional partnered mentoring, just a straightforward students with external stakeholders. And as we inherited the program and looked at the new research, we saw lots of opportunities for adjusting to really target different populations and different skill sets and ensure that we were giving the students what they needed at the correct developmental stage, and providing our community partners opportunity to interact with students who also would appreciate their contributions at the right stage. So for both populations to feel like they were having an impact and getting a mutual benefit out of the relationship, which the research does show mutuality is an essential component of that relationship.
Absolutely. And Tamara, for me, I feel like when I came into Babson, I was really inspired by my co-authors. So Wendy Murphy, Susan Duffy, and many of my colleagues at Babson. I mean, I came in, my background was really dedicated to helping people advance their career goals, building communities, building networks. And so naturally, mentorship was a big part of that. I came in to Babson kind of lucky. We had a research-backed game plan that had been implemented over the years. And I think what I was able to bring to the table was experience in program operations, experience with alumni relations, which was a big piece of the work and the success of the work. And I think also attention to detail. So being able to build that structure, design, do successful events, clear communications, and be an accountability partner for students, but also a support partner for the mentors as they support the students.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'm wondering if you can, because Valerie, that was such an important point that you just made about how your job was easier when you had the research and backing behind you. So I'm wondering, Wendy, if you can talk a little bit about that, really the importance of doing that upfront work to really lay the groundwork that sets someone like Valerie up, who's going to be responsible for the operational pieces, the implementation for success.
Well, so we're really lucky in that we have a nice infrastructure and a lot of support. But the truth is that the evidence-based mentoring we know is more successful. And so the capacity to look at what the evidence is and to have that inform our design. Looking at the literature, we knew we wanted a foundation in high quality connections and in what we know about mentoring support, which is that it's both instrumental and psychosocial. And the role modeling component is the most challenging component because often that's identity based. And so with the knowledge that we have a very diverse student population, and sometimes our mentoring base, our alumni base is less diverse, we needed to find mechanisms where students could see people who look like them, even if their direct partner didn't exactly share their same identity. So building that into the program design based on the evidence was really important. The compatibility based matching system. Lisa Finkelstein, there's a great book called Evidence-Based Mentoring. We took a lot of principles from that book, including the matching, as well as thinking about a contract, which our mentees and our mentors use. And that's really driven from the evidence. It shows that when there's an agreed upon cadence of meetings and principles underlying those meetings, what are we going to discuss? Who comes with the agenda? That relationships are more successful over time. So we're able to take the theoretical parts of the research as well as the practical implications and incorporate them into design. And then it was really important that once we were able to share that, Valerie then took it and operationalized it in a way that both the students and the mentor participants could understand.
Thanks for that, because one of the things that I note, certainly in the role where I sit, where I work with a lot of organizations, people tend to take for granted that they understand what mentoring is and they can make a program work on the fly, and they'll try and they might have some degrees of success, but then it may lack sustainability, or once that person leaves the role, right, the program fails. And so this idea of evidence-based mentoring and really using that to identify best practices is key. And it can be frustrating for folks to have to take a step back to take a step forward. But Valerie, in terms of your role in implementation, how vital was that in your eventual rollout in terms of what made the program successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like our program was structured in a way where we always started with an orientation, and we had key touch point events throughout the program. So over the course of 3 months, they met for an orientation where we talked about all this. We really were focused on teaching people how to be a good mentor, how to be a good mentee. And I think that was an element that made the program successful. We gave opportunities for midpoint check-ins where we brought all the mentors back to the table so we could talk about, did you apply what you learned in that orientation from the guidelines that we provided, what went wrong, what went right, and then they could adjust and shift throughout the program. So I think having those key touch points is important to continue to emphasize that you're not just looking to gain your end goal, but you're looking to come away with an educational experience so you can apply it in the future.
That's great. And so tell me, because you did mention, Wendy, you mentioned high quality connection, and I don't want to take for granted that folks know that. And I know Graham has done so much work on that. So can you talk a little bit more about what that is, why it was important in the context of this program, and then Valerie, really how it played out and how the program supported the development of those high quality connections?
Sure. So we know the research, over the past 100 years has always been focused on a deficit model. And instead, the positive organizational psychology movement has really moved us towards a more of a thriving model where we say what's right with relationships, what's right with the workplace. And so high quality connections typically have 3 qualities, and they're probably going to fly right out of my brain right now. The first one, the first one is a sense of positive regard. So we go into the relationship with the assumptions that the other party has the best of intentions. And in an educational environment, that's really important for the mentors in particular to recognize that students are on a developmental journey. They are not professionals yet, though they may act like professionals sometimes. They're not quite professionals yet. And so it's part of our educational mission to assume that there's good intention and just not always perfect execution. The second characteristic is mutuality, that we're both in this together, that we're responsive to one another, that we're not distracted when we're having our meetings, that we're very respectful of one another's time. And then the third is a sense of vitality. And that simply means after I've had a conversation with you, Tamara, or you, Valerie, that I leave it with a sense of more energy. And that's not that I want to do cartwheels for the rest of my day, but just that I've seen, heard, validated, and feel like it was an energizing interaction. And so this is not to have a Pollyanna approach to relationships. We're always going to have conflict. We're always going to have difficulties. We're all going to have bad days. But on balance, that our interactions derive more positive than negative, and that motivates people to re-engage each time. And so setting that up as a foundation for the relationships is really important. And as Val talked about, we know this. So that's the very first exercise we do in an orientation, is we teach them about high quality connections. And so that educational component ends up being threaded through the program.
I think to support that operationally in the program, we also start every cohort with bringing the mentors and mentees together for a speed matching, a speed networking exercise. So focus, and they become part of that matching process. So they leave that night saying, here's who I felt comfortable with, here's who I had that energy with, and here's who, maybe not so great of a match. And so by involving them in that process, we not just look at paper and say, hey, they're the same industry, go make a high quality connection. They're practicing that from the get-go, and they're getting that feeling prior to even being matched.
Yeah, that's exciting. And actually, Dion Clayborg in her chapter 11 talks about that self-directedness and that self-determination and mentor selection, and creating those opportunities for folks to develop some sort of chemistry or insights into one another for that matching. So that's terrific to know. I think one of the things I'm noting throughout the book is we're moving away really from old concepts of what mentoring is into newer ideas that really are about to the point that you just made, Wendy, recognizing the whole person and recognizing that both parties are bringing value into the relationship, and there is that mutuality and reciprocity that are so vital, particularly when mentoring now is such a powerful tool for equity and inclusion.
Absolutely.
So what have you both seen in the work that you've done? What are some of the outcomes that you've seen? What are some of the new evidence that you've seen that's come from your programs?
I guess I can start. I mean, when I think about my time at Babson running this program, a very typical, outcome I would see was I would see very high performers, high anxiety. I need a mentor. I need a job. I need to make this really difficult decision. I need the answers now, and I need the right answer. And by the end of the program, I'd see students kind of exhale. It was like, you know what? I'm going to be okay. There's many paths to success. There's, my life is a series of baby steps that are going to ultimately lead me to my end goal. And I think being able to work together one-on-one with a mentor who has been there, who has felt those feelings, and go beyond just the, how am I going to nail this job interview, is where I've seen the most positive outcomes of each program that we've run in this way. So in that short amount of time that they've been connected.
And to build on what Valerie said, I think a key data point we have is that between 85 to 90% of the pairs can plan to continue the relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
So the fact that they are willing to keep engaging, doesn't mean as frequently, but they're planning to stay connected, which means they built something that will last, which also reflects the program design and their engagement in the program. At their core, mentoring relationships are learning relationships. And I think setting expectations from the get-go that this relationship doesn't have to be perfect, but we want you to learn something from this. And here are some of the things that the skills we're hoping that you take away from that. And what Val set up, how to be a good mentee, how to be a good mentor, and go out and use those skills beyond this program to enhance your own careers. I think that that's a really important framework for participants.
And to this day, when I run into students that have participated, the first thing they always say, I'm still in touch with my mentor, or me and my mentor had coffee last week. They're so excited to see me and to tell me that. And I think that's what brings me joy from being part of this program.
That's phenomenal. Phenomenal. And one of the things that I did notice, y'all didn't just have one program, you had multiple programs, overachievers, which is fantastic. And to the point you mentioned earlier, Wendy, it is about addressing students at different stages and different needs. And so in the work that you did, what were some of the lessons learned, the key takeaways that for folks who are aspiring to implement similar programs could take from your experiences?
Should I start?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, from an operational standpoint, I think there's a lot that goes into it. And I think a lot of times people don't realize how much goes into it. So I think having someone dedicated to this program, of course, I had many other responsibilities, but someone that can really focus on building a strong structure and a good method of communication. So everyone that's participating knows, what the outcomes are, where to be and when, why we're doing what we're doing, and having that communicated right from the get-go, that they know the amount of time they're putting into it, the amount of, commitment that the program will be, and to give them that point of accountability. I think that having that, it's just not a set it and forget it, that people are relying on you to kind of be there for them if hurdles come up or if things change, is an important aspect of the program.
And I mean, Val is the community creator, right? And that central person that everyone knows they can go to with questions if they have a problem. She does a little bit of counseling with the students, with the mentors. So don't underestimate that role. Like she says, it's all operational. It's also psychosocial support that she provides.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think by design, what the multiple programs do is they take away that assumption that the mentor has to be the CEO, that the mentor has to be the president of the company that can provide. It's actually because the research shows that near peers and step ahead mentors are actually, since they're closer to your position, they actually have better, more insightful and directed both advice and support and consultation, whereas someone who's many years removed actually has more difficulty identifying with what you're going through. And so by design, having the peer mentoring where our first year students are partnered with a junior or senior student, because developmentally, that's where they are. They're just starting their experience as a student, and they actually need senior students to help guide them a little bit. And then those juniors and seniors who are looking to transition into the workplace, having young career professionals mentoring them, where it's really about the transition to work. And what they're doing to make that successful transition. And then when we look at our MBA population or our master's programs, they really need more senior career professionals. So looking for people who have that 15+ years experience. And so tailoring the populations to the right match is actually really important, and creating community among the mentors themselves. So it also gives the mentors both a learning experience from their relationship with students, as well as with each other as professionals, to take those skills forward and network. So the multiple community building is really an essential part of what was designed here.
That's phenomenal. Well, I always struggle in these conversations because I read everything and I'm learning so much as we're talking, and then it's firing off so many ideas in my head of things that I want to do, I want to implement. And so thank you for bringing that vitality to this conversation, because I'm ready to go run off and get things started. But before we go, I wanna ask you. So, right, we have listeners who may be in the early stages of implementation, and maybe in the early stages of planning. And so as they're listening to you both and others who've contributed, what do you think is something that is a must-have for a successful mentoring program?
I would say definitely, a mechanism for shared expectations, that, setting those expectations early on. Here's what we hope to gain from this program. Also having the mentor and mentee have that initial essential conversation where they're going to share what their expectations are, what their goals are. So that mechanism of goal setting, especially when it comes to a short-term program. I mean, we only had 3 months together. And then from there, they would continue on with their mentorship, but giving those guides to build that relationship and that trust quickly, so you could get to that point to continue on more long-term.
I'm going to build on what Val said, and actually it's 3 things, right? It's number 1, the coordinator or director of the program who serves as the overall point person. Number 2, an orientation where you can set clear parameters and build relationships using what we know about high quality connections. And 3, clear start and end for the program, and cadence expectations for meetings, so that people understand what their commitment is when they sign up on either end, student or mentor, and they understand that, what the program does end, so our support will end, but you can do with what you've learned and move forward. So there's just a clear understanding there. So those 3 things are really important.
That's great. And what would be something that maybe is a nice to have? I perhaps don't have all the resources that I need at this first go, but what would be a nice to have?
Gosh, there's so many things I feel I must have.
I know.
Nice to have. This is a harder question. I think that that maybe, the active participation and the matching process. I mean, that was so high value to us. But if you can't get everybody together in one room and you want to get things started, perhaps creating a virtual, experience where they can come together and meet each other. But if you do have, 100 people in your program, and you can't physically do that, then maybe you could go ahead and move forward with taking action on the program with those orientations, those clear guidelines, and everything else that we mentioned as must have.
I would say 2 things: a budget for food for the gathering.
Oh, yeah. You don't need food, yes.
But food makes all the difference, right? People gather over food. It's community building. And the second actually is a learning platform. So for us, we have Canvas, other campuses have Blackboard, but it serves as a repository for articles, references, things that you refer to in the program, the slides that you use. You know, as an educator, I put a lot of references in the bottom of my slides that'll click to resources. So having a central place, a repository for resources and support, particularly for the mentors, the mentees might look at it, but it's really the mentors who are really interested in reading more, learning more, using some of those resources for their own professional development at their own organizations or companies. So some sort of learning management system where you have a repository.
Right. And what could we live without?
Can live without?
Yes, what can we live without?
Oh, should
I know, I can't even think of it.
I thought the question was, what can't we live without? So, I would definitely say you can't live without those clear communications and those guidelines and the accountability portion.
You don't need fancy guest speakers.
Yeah, yep.
I mean, you don't, what matters in these kinds of programs are that you get people interacting very quickly. You get them interacting, then you give them some information, you interact more so that it's really experiential design. That's what enables people to build community and to build relationships. If you have just someone lecturing at them, it's not effective.
And I want to mention, you really don't need a high-end matching computer software system, right? So I mean, we came into Babson and I mean, at first I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have a platform that matches people, you know? And I think that we were able to really leverage the interactive compatibility-based matching. I pulled in students to help kind of with the matching process. And I mean, we really served a lot of students that way. And I think for operations and program managers, they feel like they need to have that, but you can just get started. Just try to pilot with a small cohort and build from there. And if your numbers are off the charts, you know, you can then look to invest in something of that manner. But I feel like the organic match was way more successful than higher end platforms that I've used in other institutions.
Terrific. Well, thank you both so much for the work that you've done, your contribution to mentoring, and making sure that students have access to these incredible experiences, and then for sharing that with us all in your case study. We hope that I know I'm inspired to go and change some things that I'm currently working on, and I hope the audience feels the same way and goes in and reads your case study in detail to see the incredible work you've done. So thank you both so much for our conversation today and your contributions.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the next podcast.
Bye.